The opinions expressed by the host and guests in this show are not necessarily the views of Children's Health Defense.
Good morning, CHD. Welcome to Pediatric Perspectives, where we are taking a look at children's health from a different perspective. One that includes critical thinking. We are not afraid to tackle difficult topics. I have an incredible guest today, Dr. Michael Gaeta. His purpose is to create a culture of nature first, drugs last. He is a practicing dietitian, nutritionist, herbalist, acupuncturist with 36 years of clinical experience in Chinese and natural functional medicine. He's trained over 20,000 healthcare professionals in his 33 plus years of teaching, hosts his own weekly podcast on natural health, health freedom, and that can be found at michaelgaeta.com. Welcome to the show, Michael.
Paul, so good to be back, my friend.
It is great to have you on the show. You are just this fountain of wisdom.
That makes two of us.
I was going to challenge you with a whole bunch of questions that relate to
Sure.
pediatrics. And I thought, let's start with historically,
Yeah.
And the current relevance of informed consent.
Well, that's a great question. And as many of the CHD TV listeners know, this went back to the Nuremberg doctors' trials in 1947, trying to protect people from unwanted medical procedures or experiments. And it's become extra important, in your field of pediatrics, because we really haven't had fully informed, uncoerced consent probably for decades in the United States. There's either a lack, because informed consent has two parts. It has to be fully informed, intended benefits, all possible risks. And then the second part is consent, which should be uncoerced and voluntary.
Right.
Honoring the principle of personal bodily sovereignty and personal agency related to one's own bodily sphere and that of one's children.
Yeah.
So we haven't had like either of those. We've got lack of informed about risks, and as with unfortunately with many of your colleagues, a lot of like coercion, pontificating, judgment, shame, guilt, all of this type of stuff.
Right.
That is really inappropriate.
You make a very good point. You cannot have mandates and
Right.
informed consent, right?
That's right.
Two things are just contradictory.
Yes.
Thank you for that. That was a nice little introduction to a very important point that I want listeners to pay attention to. If you're being mandated to do something, you are not being given informed consent, and somebody is basically attacking your bodily integrity, right?
With the experimental injections, the COVID shots, these were authorized under emergency use authorization. And in federal law, the federal code states that there can be no mandates for any EUA intervention, right? So if it's authorized under EUA, you cannot require anybody in any context to do that intervention.
So how did they get around that?
They just ignored it. They said, well, we said so. We're your boss. We're your school.
Right.
And it was over the top, it was really a totalitarian, move. But again, it was all ginned up by the fear and the fake COVID numbers and the financial incentives to diagnose COVID deaths to try to scare people into voluntarily accepting these experimental injections.
Yeah. That's unfortunately what happened to so many of our loved ones.
Indeed.
Moving on, I'm going to hit you with a lot of topics. We're going to go
Sure.
rapid fire today.
Do it. Let's do it.
Talk to us about vaccines and autoimmune disease.
Yes, a favorite subject of mine, actually. We
Okay.
cover this in autoimmunemasteryprogram.com. Is a very detailed course on the subject. We have a whole section on vaccines and autoimmunity. So here's the thing. Autoimmune disease is defined as an excessive immune response to body tissues. Now, low levels of autoimmunity are normal, natural, and healthy. We must make antibodies to body tissues and healthy body cells at low levels to control growth or prevent them from going somewhere they shouldn't go in the body. So liver cells appearing in your eye, that sort of thing. You need to have low levels of autoimmunity, and that's fine. That's why we have a reference range on the antibody test. Low levels are fine. Autoimmune disease is an excessive buildup of these natural tissue antibodies. Now, that requires the loss of immunological tolerance. Tolerance is an immunology term that means it's the don't shoot signal. She's one of us.
Mm.
Don't shoot, right? It's
Mhm.
the prevent friendly fire signal from the immune system. That's a body cell, leave it alone. That breaks down in autoimmunity, and that immunological tolerance breaks down when the immune system is in a state of chronic stimulation. A
Mm.
healthy immune system is very quiet and very strong, but then when there's a threat, it becomes very robust, takes care of the threat, and then goes back to a very quiescent, quiet state. If the immune system is forced to be in a state of constant chronic stimulation, as is caused by vaccine adjuvants like aluminum or squalene,
Mhm.
or even common events like intestinal dysbiosis.
Mm.
This puts the body in the immune system in a state of high alert all the time. And that is where immunological tolerance breaks down. We even have a textbook called Vaccines and Autoimmunity, edited by probably the top autoimmune researcher on the planet, Dr. Yehuda Schoenfeld in Israel. So it's not a theory. We have very clearly demonstrated the chronic immune stimulation is just one of the mechanisms.
Yeah, that's a book in my library, and I remember reading that one
Yes,
going, "Oh my goodness, here's the proof," right? You've got hundreds of references,
that's
from
right.
a leading immunologist in the world,
Yes,
but it was just sort of put aside. So that would explain, it seems to me,
yeah,
you could add a comment to this, why we have so much trouble with the childhood vaccine schedule because we have
yes,
jammed so many vaccines into
yes.
a short period of time. Can you comment on that?
Well, yeah, there are upper allowable limits for aluminum exposure. The vaccine schedule, and I know it's changing, which is good, becoming a little more European sized. But the vaccine schedule far exceeds by hundreds of times on a given visit the allowable exposure to aluminum. And the classic shell game that the vaccine cult, to quote Aaron Siri, uses is that, it's perfectly safe. And they're mixing up ingested aluminum, most of which is cleared through hepatic or liver clearance, versus injected aluminum, which is entirely different. So when you eat it, that's one thing, like an aluminum can residue is a trace amount. But when you inject it, it's a very different thing. So the reason we have at least twice as much autoimmune disease per capita in the US compared to other developed nations is, in my opinion, largely, not entirely, due to the fact that we have the biggest vaccine schedule on the planet
Yeah.
with the most aluminum and other exposures. And just, I mean, the size of the schedule is not, as you know, better than anybody. It has not been properly evaluated for safety.
Right. No, you bring up a very good point. The ingested aluminum, that which you eat or drink, I
Hmm.
think the number is somewhere around 0.1 to 0.3%
Yes.
is
Yes.
absorbed.
Yep.
So the rest just passes on through. It doesn't even enter the body.
Right.
Injected aluminum is 100%. Boom, it's in
Hmm.
your body.
It's in your
Yeah.
blood. Yep.
All right. This next question, I don't know what you're going to say, but I'm curious about it. And that is germs cause disease.
Yeah, it's a big one. Yeah, I'd refer to people to Dr. Tom Cowan's The Contagion Myth. This idea goes back to one of my favorite quotes, and I know you learned about this guy in medical school, Dr. Rudolf Virchow. And Virchow's triad is still used in cardiology as a syndrome or a diagnostic criteria. But Virchow said, and he passed away early 1900s, he said, if I could live my life over again, I would devote my life to proving that germs are not the cause of disease, but rather, and I'm paraphrasing now, that it's the terrain
Mm,
that is the issue. And the example he gave was he said mosquitoes are attracted to stagnant water but do not cause the water to become stagnant. So if you look at that, the idea, the issue, and you could easily look at, and I've seen this, having seen, you and I have seen many thousands of patients over the years. The issue with what we call infection is that this bacterial or viral, whatever it is, and the virus is another question, it may be an effect, not a cause
Hmm.
of the diseased tissue. In other words, there could be even what we might consider a bacterial infection, but it's only going to take hold in weak, nutritionally deficient, diseased, susceptible tissue. So
Gotcha.
that's one thing, and that we call that the host state, that you're going to get sick when your immune system or when that tissue is weak. The other aspect of it, and this goes back to, I studied Rudolf Steiner a fair bit. My kids were in Waldorf school for 12 years, and that it's really a detoxification process, what we call getting sick, getting a cold, getting a flu, may be a healthy detoxification event. Body temperature goes up to raise metabolism, and it's really the body cleaning itself at a cellular level. So those are a couple of layers to it. But
Okay.
I think this germ causes this disease really has been kind of disproven.
Hmm. Well, I'm going to push back a little on that one.
Yeah,
I actually agree in the sense that if I am sickly, I am more vulnerable
right,
to getting an infection.
right.
So if we look at measles, because that's a big concern for people right now, we're
Yeah,
having a big measles outbreak worldwide, but in the
sure.
US for sure. Um, we know from studies, and you can elaborate and say more about this, that if you have adequate vitamin A status, if you have adequate
Yes.
vitamin D status, so in other words, your
Hmm.
body is properly prepared, you
Yes.
probably aren't going to get measles, or if you do, it will be a nothing scary.
Yes.
But you weren't saying that measles can't make you sick.
No, no, I'm saying that you need to have the stage set for a thing to happen. In other words, the body has to be in a weakened state for something to take hold. Just
Right.
like the big flu outbreak 1918, that was World War One. A
Mm,
lot of people were nutritionally deficient at that time. And now we have the current evidence. Nobody died of the flu. It was secondary bacterial pneumonia that killed them, not the flu itself.
mm,
Flu is relatively benign. It's the pneumonia complications that are more of an issue. So, yeah, that's a perfect example, Paul. Who gets measles? Well, it's probably due to some nutritional deficiency because the immune system requires nutrition, minerals like calcium, vitamins like C, A, F, and D. It's the nutritional deficiency that makes the tissue susceptible to an infection that might occur. In Chinese medicine, we look at baby rashes as a detoxification event.
okay.
And we know these days there's a lot of maternal toxins pass through the placenta, pass through breast milk, and a rash, maybe in some cases, is a healthy detoxification and also activate the immune system, like going to the gym event.
Hmm.
That it may not be something to be suppressed, but something to support the child through rather than suppress whatever that is. So that's another take on it, is that it might be a rashes, chickenpox, measles, might be, at least in some cases, a detoxification event.
Interesting. Certainly eczema, which is so
Yes,
common these days,
yes,
right?
yes.
You
Mostly in the
can
vaccinated.
mostly in the vaccinated, although we do have eczema occurring in unvaccinated children,
Yes,
infants.
yes.
And I think your theory of that being a detox process is probably a good one.
At least in
Um,
some cases.
yes. How about the notion? And I read Dissolving Illusions, and that
Oh,
helped me understand the answer to
yes,
this question. But I'm interested
yes,
in your take on it.
yeah,
Vaccines eliminated epidemics.
yes. Yeah, a common myth used by the vaccine cult to get people to accept these relatively untested drugs.
Oh,
So,
let me interject. You
yeah,
use the
please.
term vaccine cult, and that's gonna some people are gonna go, what? Aaron
Right, right, right.
Series book, right? Vaccines, Amen. He
Yes,
makes it really clear about how the whole
yeah.
vaccine process is kind of a religion almost.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Anyway,
right.
carry on.
Yeah,
Sorry.
I can use another word. It's fine. Even Bobby Kennedy talked about this. He said, appeals to experts is not a feature of science.
Mm-hmm.
It's a feature of religion,
Yep.
for example. So anyway, yeah, so what we know is, and I'll give measles as an example. Measles cases peaked around, per capita, peaked around 1915 to 1917. And there was a significant death toll from the measles at that time.
Right.
Measles, like every other vaccinated disease, declined due to improvements in sanitation, hygiene, nutrition, living and working conditions. As Bobby Kennedy pointed out, it's very difficult for anyone to die of any infection. I'm not saying it's impossible, but much less likely, unless there's a significant case of malnutrition or nutritional deficiency. And I would, as a nutritionist, I would agree with that.
Mm-hmm.
So improvements in all those things, living, because we had the thing that set the stage for all the epidemics was the Industrial Revolution. We had this mass migration into the cities, did not have the infrastructure to handle, collectively millions of people living in close quarters without proper sanitation, hygiene, clean water, good living and working conditions, the sanitation department, all kinds of things. Just set the stage for all kinds of problems.
Mm-hmm.
All of the vaccinated diseases went into incredible remission long before the vaccines were even available, including diseases like scarlet fever and tuberculosis, for which there was never a vaccine, went away in the same timeline, in the
Right.
same way. Deaths from measles went down 99.48% per capita the year before the vaccine was even introduced. The vaccine was introduced in 63,
Mm-hmm.
widely available in 68. By 1962, everybody got the measles, and it was a Brady Bunch episode. But very few died of the measles. We had millions of children getting the measles
Right.
the early 60s, and about 400 died. And that's terrible if that's your kid, but the per capita death rate was almost gone, 99.48%. Before the vaccine was introduced, vaccine comes out, the cases went down dramatically, but the
Mm-hmm.
death rate per capita did not. So that's true of every vaccinated disease. So no vaccine, this is the key point, no vaccine has ever eliminated any epidemic at any time in history.
Wow. And we were led to believe otherwise.
Oh yeah, it saved millions of lives. And
Right.
look at smallpox. The original vaccine, they had the most deaths from smallpox in the most intensively vaccinated areas. And
Right.
Leicester County in England, the physician in charge of public health there is like, we're dropping like flies. Let's just
Mm-hmm.
experiment and use quarantine, stop vaccinating. And suddenly they had the best outcomes of any
Yeah.
county in England, the least disease, the least death.
Quarantine works, by the way. I
Absolutely.
get families wanting advice, information. I don't
Yeah,
diagnose or treat anymore, but
right,
I can
right.
certainly tell them that quarantine works. If you're
For a
worried about,
millennium,
yeah, for any of
millennium.
those diseases, right?
Absolutely.
So, are you saying that vaccines and antibody titers don't protect babies?
They're not, most states call vaccine titers or antibody titers, quote, proof of immunity, which is kind of silly
Right.
because, so I don't think the titers are relevant or very relevant. They may have some relevance, but not a lot. At most, not a lot. And here's why. Most of the cases of things like pertussis, whooping cough, have been fully vaccinated and have positive antibody titers. So that's thing one. And even in a fully vaccinated population, we still have outbreaks. We're confusing outbreaks, which is going to happen forever, regardless of vaccination rate, with death and mortality, right? So we're not too concerned about, and this is part of, they did this in COVID. They got everybody freaked about cases, right? And you know this, everybody knows it. Like I had chicken pox, I still have a scar right here. Cases are irrelevant. What we're concerned about is deaths,
Mm-hmm.
right? And so chickenpox is not a deadly disease. Measles is not a deadly disease. Obviously, there's exceptions in the very malnourished, but the titers don't reflect immunity. Meaning, immunity means resistant to that or other pathogens. But that's not reflected necessarily in the antibody titer status, in other words, measurable antibodies, because you can be protected without antibodies and you can have antibodies and get sick. So it's not well correlated. And so that's what we call laboratory efficacy. That's part of the shell game is they say, oh, look, you have antibodies, you're protected, and that's called laboratory efficacy, not necessarily clinical efficacy. Like, are they actually or will they do better with that positive titer?
Right. And we've shown with pertussis whooping cough, for example, that using the acellular vaccine has been a huge failure because
That's
pe-
right.
people can
That's
have
right.
antibodies, but they're still getting pertussis. They're still bringing pertussis home to the
That's right.
expose those infants.
Yes.
I met a man, actually it was during COVID. I went on a motorcycle trip around the Southwest and I met a
Nice.
man in a restaurant the first day they opened up the restaurants and he had A gamma globulin. He was in his
Mm,
30s, had never had a serious infection in his life. His mom
mm,
let him play in the dirt, didn't worry about, he was supposed to get shots monthly. I remember giving a kid shots monthly back when I was in training
mm.
uh, for that condition, and he was fine. That's the other arm of his immune system doing its job, right?
Yes, that's a great point, Paul. There are 6 areas of the immune system, innate, acquired, or the humoral or adaptive immunity with antibodies is only one of the 6 areas. So you have other, and this is why, they say, oh, babies are unprotected against illness until they get shots. That's not true at all. There's innate or cellular immunity, as well as maternally transferred immunoglobulins from breast milk. Plus, we have the microbiome, we have the glial system in the brain, we have the interferon system, we have the endocannabinoid system. We have so many aspects of the immune system that have nothing to do with antibodies. But the vaccine field has overemphasized antibodies and underemphasized these other areas of immunity.
I'm going to have you back for an episode just on that topic.
Love to, love
That
to.
would be an awesome one. We keep hearing, I mean, as a pediatrician, I heard my whole career vaccines are
Yes,
safe and effective.
yes,
The CDC schedule is safe and effective. What do you
yes.
say to that?
Well, 2 things. One is they faked the safety studies.
Mm,
They would compare vaccines to another vaccine or to the adjuvant. They did that with HPV vaccines. They compared in the safety study, oh, we did a placebo-controlled trial, but the placebo was not an inert substance like a saline solution or what they say a sugar pill.
mhm.
It was another vaccine that it was compared to, or the vaccine adjuvant like aluminum hydroxide. So that's not an inert placebo-controlled study. Second thing is the duration of these safety studies is often very short, even 5 days, for example, which is not going to give you long-term safety data. Every other class of drugs takes years of safety studies, inert placebo-controlled safety studies, before they receive approval. And so vaccines were just given this, it's like magical fairy dust sprinkled on this class of drugs with presumed safety, just called they're called vaccines. And the only class of drugs that's exempt from long-term inert placebo safety studies. So that's all thing one. Thing two, when they say, oh, they've been tested for safety, the schedule was never tested for safety. The FDA only evaluates individual vaccines, not combinations. And
Mhm.
so when you say the schedule is safe, I mean, that's insane. They never tested combinations. And so there's a well-known entity in conventional medicine of polypharmacy, where 1 plus 1 might equal 7. Like you
Right.
combine this drug with that drug, and something entirely different happens. Well, the vaccine schedule is polypharmacy. And the thing we don't know is what happens when you mix drugs, right? Even in other classes of drugs, we know pretty good what happens with one drug and we know a little bit of what happens with two. As soon as a person is taking 3 or more meds, we have no clue at
No idea.
all what
Right.
it will do in that individual. And then you're going to, I mean, Paul, how many, when you were, vaccinating, how many vaccines would you administer at a single visit,
Oh
potentially?
gosh. I mean, the 2-month-old, the 4-month-old, the 6-month-old visits, these babies were getting 6, 7, 8 different antigens
Wow.
vaccine. I mean, the
Wow.
DPT is 3 vaccines in one needle, but
Wow. Yeah.
yeah, it's incredibly insane in my opinion
Wow.
because we
Agreed.
didn't know what it was doing, right?
No.
You're just told
No.
it's safe and pediatricians believe it.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yes. Presumed safety.
So then that leads me to my next question. I did some analysis of data, so I know the answer to
A
this, but
lot. Yeah.
I'm interested in your take on this. Vaccinated children are healthier than unvaccinated. This is why you need to go get your child vaccinated.
Yeah. Yeah. So that's another common assertion of the vaccine field. And that is certainly not based. I mean, I treated my first vaccine injured kid. I've been practicing 36 years, first vaccine injured kid 34 years ago. And treated not nearly as many kids as you. I have a family practice, but
Right.
many kids, and I even in my own experience, but also in the data. And you go through this beautifully in your book. I really recommend folks get Vax Facts. What a brilliant book! And you go
Thank
through the
you.
data of here's the vaccinated kids and here's the unvaccinated kids. 100%, even my own kids are routinely healthier than their vaccinated peers who were frequently sick with ear infections and colds and flus and rashes and asthma and inhalers and autism spectrum. We have right now the sickest population of children in human history
Yeah.
are fully vaccinated American kids. Why? Because of the foods, certainly, lack of exercise, sun exposure, too many screens. But also, we have the biggest vaccine schedule, and it's 100%. And Paul, you did this. You did an extensive data analysis with our mutual friend, James Lyons Weiler, and
Right.
published a wonderful study that everybody should read, comparing that in your own like massive clinic and aggregating lots of data. The healthiest kids are unvaccinated. And we see this even in communities like Amish communities. These kids are rarely, if ever, sick. And the sickest kids are fully vaccinated, and the partially vaccinated kids are sort of in the middle.
Right.
And that's just how it is. And, one of your predecessors, Robert Mendelsohn, said the same thing. The greatest cause of childhood illness are the ineffectual efforts made to prevent those illnesses through mass vaccination. He said that in the 70s, and he was
Yeah. He's way ahead
absolutely,
of his time.
that's right. That's right.
So, what do you say to the statement that I hear far too often that, well, the
Yes.
science has proven that vaccines
Yeah.
don't cause autism?
Right. And we had decades of science that said that cigarettes didn't cause any health problems and was actually beneficial. And we call that junk science or tobacco science.
Right.
Uh, and like with the, it was usually the tobacco industry that's ran that research or funded that research. Same thing. We have pharma funded research basically to defend their products. So no, the science is evolving. Anytime you say the science is settled, you've exited the realm of science. Science is
Right.
never settled.
Right.
Science is an ongoing process of exploration, asking questions, and investigation. So, if you just look at the data, of the vax-unvax studies, there's over 100 of them, and they're very clear. The unvaccinated kids are the healthiest.
So just today, I read a paper that I'm like, whoa, this
Yes.
this is about the MMR, the MMRV, and death
Oh,
from the
devastating.
MMR. Poor Andrew Wakefield. I mean, he is a
Oh,
hero of mine. Wrote an article back in the 1990s, 1998,
98. Yep.
1998, and he just had the audacity to make this comment in his at the end of the paper that there might be an association between MMR and autism,
Yep.
and they crucified him. They destroyed his career.
Yep.
Um, and people to this day think of him as a fraud. What
Yep.
do you say to that?
He knew it was going to be controversial. He brought on the top pediatricians, pediatric gastroenterologists, pediatric neurologists in the world to co-author that paper because he knew it would be controversial. And the paper said, we are not saying that MMR causes autism. That's outside the scope of this paper. What we're
Mhm.
saying is that there's an association between gut inflammation and brain inflammation. In this, it was just a case series. In other
Right.
words, a 10 or 12, whatever it was, kids. And
Yeah.
that's all we're saying because they had autism symptoms after vaccination. They had gut inflammation. We treated the gut inflammation and the autism got better. That's all they said. So we treated the gut inflammation with steroids, dairy, and gluten-free diet for a few weeks, and the kids got better neurologically. And but because he, poked the sacred cow, so to speak, he was attacked for it. By the way, that paper, that study, has been replicated, I think by now, 36 times by independent research groups all over the world, came up with the same conclusion. So he's been utterly vindicated, but again, it took a while.
Wow. I didn't realize there were that many. I thought there was 2 or 3 studies. So yes, thank you, Dr. Wakefield, for
Yes.
sticking your neck out for the world.
Yes.
Sorry it took 3 decades
It did.
for us to almost 3 decades for us to
did.
uncover what's really been going on.
Yes.
I'm going to end this session with one last question, and that is
Sure.
if you could just speak about herd immunity.
Yeah. Yeah, herd immunity, this is a concept discovered in the 1930s, looking at measles incidents in Baltimore and Chicago. And it was a public health service, physician, official, researcher guy who found that if once the population, I think it was about 76% had natural immunity, that the incidence of that measles in this case precipitously declined in that community. And he looked at 3 different cities, the same pattern. The thresholds were a little different. It was somewhere between the 60s to 70s, not more than 80%. Natural immunity to the natural, what these days we call wild infection. So herd immunity is real, but only applies to naturally acquired wild type infection. Has nothing to do, and so they just assumed that vaccine immunity would be the same. No evidence, no data, nothing. And we have pertussis outbreaks in 99% vaccinated populations. And when I started practicing in the early 1990, in the early 90s, herd immunity was 80% vaccination. Then it went to 85. Then it was 90 and 95. And so they just kept going up because the data proved that regardless of vaccination status in a community, there'd still be outbreaks, which is not a big deal. Kids get sick, kids recover typically. So herd immunity only applies to naturally acquired infections. Vaccine immunity, so-called, is short-lived. Typically, it lasts a few years, maybe 10 at most, typically 2 or 3. The antibody titers wear off. As if that was relevant, which is very minor relevance. But herd immunity is real, but only with naturally acquired wild type infections.
Yeah. I'm a baby of the 50s, so I got measles, mumps, rubella, and all those things.
Sure,
and I remember I've seen graphs of these illnesses, and what happens is we all got it. I mean, at that period of time, you all children got all those infections.
Right.
So then you'd have a period of 2, 3, 4 years where everybody had immunity. But you've got more and more babies added to the population who don't have immunity. I mean, they're protected by their mom's transferred immunity. That only lasts 6 months, a year at the most, maybe. And so then eventually you have enough people vulnerable. You have another outbreak. Boom, everybody gets protected. So that's that cyclical nature. But yeah, we sure saw with COVID, the vaccine-induced so-called immunity, it was lasting only months.
Right.
And then it was negative efficacy. You were actually more likely to get an infection
right.
if you had been vaccinated. I want to thank you, Dr. Gaeta. You have provided us a host of important information today. And I want to have you back because I want to delve into a couple pediatric topics. So we're going to have you back soon. I want to thank you for being on the show.
Happy to. And I created a page, michaelgaeta.com/CHD for your listeners.
Wonderful. Well, we'll give you that link below in the description. And as always, thank you for watching. I'm Dr. Paul, your host. You can find me at kidsfirstforever.com. And I look forward to seeing you again next week.
Right, we are live. Okay, tell everyone your name, please.
Sanea Davis.
And now we're going to tell everyone who your husband was.
My husband was,
He wrote these books.
yes, David Denton Davis, MD. was one of the pioneers that made emergency medicine as a specialty in this country during Vietnam, and he was also one of the charter members and founders of the American College of Emergency Physicians. Most of his career was in Boston. When we met 35 years ago, he worked in San Diego in the ER, and he started delving with sudden infant death syndrome.
So you started looking at sudden infant death syndrome?
Yes, it took us to New Zealand, it took us to Great Britain. He felt it was environmental, and a chemist in New Zealand said pay attention to the vaccines as well. And it was hard for him with this book in 2012 because my stepchildren had all been vaccinated, and it was hard for him to imagine that, his basis was polio when he was growing up. But the more he delved, and there were two things that happened in our life. Our oldest grandson was diagnosed with high-functioning Asperger's, and in his book, he had a practice in Colorado. We had a second home there, and he was called to give a woman a shot in Aspen, and then she asked him to give her son, who was 16 at the time, gentle giant, 300 pounds, nonverbal, headphones, stimming. She asked him to give him a shot. And that, just a shot for, he fell off, he was at the camp for
tetanus shot.
Yes, and that set him on the journey. That set him, he knew there was somebody in there. And this young man was from Houston, and he was in an institution, drugged up, and it just set him on a journey of what this is. And then 20 years of, if you would have asked a year ago, 2 years ago, if there was any correlation between vaccines and autism, he would say, I don't think, I know. And of course, we watched Vaxxed. He started talking to every doctor, trying way back 10, 15 years ago to get them to recognize VAERS. And the biggest thing was in 2017, I believe, when the 50-year anniversary of ACEP came to La Jolla, where we lived. His book had just come out, and he begged the outgoing president, who we were friends with, to at least recognize VAERS and to change the protocols of reporting, instead of asking when the latest, if you were current with your shots, when the latest shot was, and then if the baby came in seizing, he was telling them all about 1980s, everything he had learned, and no one would listen. And the answer was, they already have too much to do. It's too much work for them.
Who said that?
The outgoing president of ACEP. And finally, though, because he had a friend that was very political, they at least recognized VAERS. But when COVID hit, well, the bottom line is, when his last book came out, which is Who Can Parents Trust, he was attacked on Facebook. I actually did some promo pieces for him because I was very involved with the Carmel Film Festival. And in fact, the last year, I kept talking about autism. You have to do films about autism. I was trying to create awareness because my husband predicted everything that was going to happen, including COVID. So we moved from La Jolla to Carmel Valley because he knew he had been a target. And then he got diagnosed with testicular cancer. And we thought he beat it. He was actually a miracle because we were going to North Carolina for one of our grandchildren's graduation. And lo and behold, when he got off the plane, he had a deep vein thrombosis. His leg was swelled up, and being an ER doc, he was afraid that he was going to lose his leg. And he must have known. Anyhow, the bottom line is, when we spent the night in the ER, they told him he had a mass and it was stage 4. So he went and did modified chemo in Monterey, and he actually gave his young oncologist, who I now distrust, he gave him the book, and he would tell everybody, especially doctors and nurses. Well, December came, he started his treatment in June. December came, and we had a lot of prayers because we are very spiritual people, and his scan was clean. So he decided that he was going to, we moved down to Paso when COVID hit because he was working at Salinas. He questioned the shots right off, and he also told, he was working at urgent care. That was part of his healing. He was a workaholic, and he was working with the farm workers. And then we moved down to Paso for 6 months because Paso Robles was more conservative. And he called everything that was going to happen. And he said, I just want to travel in a Sprinter and see the country before the country changed. And my sister lives in Florida, and he begged all of his children not to take shots. My niece is a doctor in Florida and was inspired by him to go into emergency medicine, and she was so indoctrinated. She was having a baby at 40 years old and took the shots during pregnancy. And I would feed my family with all of this information. The only person that listened was my nephew. And my husband he just couldn't understand, but he saw it gradually happening, how medicine was becoming corporatized. So speed up to 2021. Actually, he got up after the chemo, and after he beat it the first time, he got up to go to a rally for UCSD to stand up for the nurses here when the mandates were coming. So he's a brave heart, but a couple of years ago we were traveling and his other leg swelled up, and he knew something was back. And in my viewpoint, cancer is treatable, and I can tell you that I snuck ivermectin into him. There were so many things that I observed when we came back to California. He had a secondary cancer, probably created by the first chemo. And my family live in Florida, so he knew that he would have to have a colostomy. I thought Florida would be a free state. What I observed at University of Miami just shocked me, and I caught the surgeon in a lie. I have a lot of evidence, but I just want to get the word out because I was alone. My family, they were a disappointment, but I also have compassion because it's a system that is so broken. My husband, we did a fundraiser because we also had been involved with hyperbaric oxygen medicine for years. He shadowed the father of hyperbaric. He was so ahead, he was so brilliant. I know this was his life's path. I believe that got him through the surgery. And when I caught the surgeon in lies to protect his own.
Tell us about it.
So my husband said, I am going to do hyperbaric oxygen therapy in preparation for the surgery. Now that's another thing. He thought he was going to go into sepsis when Scripps told him he had the secondary cancer. That was in November. We drove across country to Florida. It took them till February to get him that surgery, and we even had to do it on an emergency basis because they kept pressuring him. They were stonewalling him to do more chemo, and he'd already researched. He's one of them. He said, no, I want quality of life. Whatever God wants me to go, I know that what that entails. And the surgeon said, well, I'm not going to do the surgery unless you do radiation. So my husband kept playing the system, plus he's on Medicare now. He he had to have permission from the surgeon to go do the hyperbarics. And the surgeon had actually, they had a hyperbaric oxygen chamber at University of Miami. The surgeon actually was going to do a study, but he never could do the funding for reversing burns from radiation. So my husband went and I think he did about 8 sessions. And I honestly believe that's what got him through the surgery. Later on, now before the surgery, he had to have an MRI. And I think God saved him, because they were going to do the dye, and his legs were going so spastic that he had to cut the whole thing before they gave him the dye. So when he had the consult on a Zoom call, the surgeon said, "We can't read the MRI. I want you to do another one." And my husband said no, he wasn't going to go through that pain to do that. And that he also was doing the hyperbaric oxygen therapy. And I heard the surgeon say, "I never told you should do that," which was an outright lie, because I was witness. Now speed up to the last day after the surgery, and actually my husband was doing very well. I found him a rehab hospital that I have tapes how well he was doing. The surgeon heard that we were going back to California because my family just couldn't support us the way we expected. And he said to me, if he were to leave the planet, he wanted to be in California and he wanted to be on a vineyard, and me having the support of my friends. Well, he gave us a report. And I went home and looked at the report, which I never allowed my husband to read. And we had one more appointment with the oncologist, who was a decent man. And I read that he said my husband had been doing hyperbaric oxygen therapy for years, which my husband, it was almost alluding to all the cancers and all the mass that he put in this report, like my husband was riddled with cancer, was caused by hyperbaric oxygen therapy. So I brought it up with the oncologist, and my husband was looking at me because he was fearful. He was fearful that, I had to be my husband's ears. He had a hearing aid. His mind was still intact. Even his body, with whatever they put him through, he fought till the end. And so I just didn't realize he did get good home care. We were living in a hotel the last 6 weeks of Florida. He got really good home care. And I didn't think what it was going to be like, because I never gave up hope. But there must have been some part of him that knew he was going to leave from California. And we went to San Luis Obispo County and rented a place on a vineyard. And I set up home care for him because he had to have a fall in order to do that, and made friends with the paramedics, because he was also one of the pioneers that trained the first paramedics in this country in Massachusetts. Well, that first trip to the ER, he also knew that he was chronically anemic and that he would need another blood transfusion. And the hospitalist at this hospital, I don't know if I should name names.
Don't know. No.
Okay. Was very kind, because they knew somebody mutually and he was of the same age. And he sped it up so my husband could get the transfusion and stay overnight and get the care he needed. Well, the first mistake they made was when they gave him the transfusion, the nurse did not hydrate him. So he went 12 hours until the male nurse the next day, at least they were honest about it, and I put in a complaint. So that was in May of last year. I can tell you the next falls that he had, basically in June, he thought he was going going into bowel obstruction. It would take me an hour to tell you all the details, but all I know is that man had a near-death experience. He was supposed to die 3 times. And I have the surgeon on tape in my phone saying, "You're going to die. Do you want to take the hard landing or the soft landing?" And what I witnessed a chief of ER telling me horror stories about if his bowel was perforated, how he would die, and it turns out they made a mistake. And he knew it. He knew it as a doctor intuitively. It rectified itself after they put him on comfort care. And once they started putting him on comfort care, they let him have bed sores. I just know, again, all he would talk about is what he was writing about, how terrible what they did in this system with COVID, with the forced vaccines. And that hospital was one of the worst. I heard from the nurses how people died. And
so he was writing another book about the COVID.
Oh yes, he predicted.
So you think that he killed him?
Yes, I do. I really do. I do, because I had, the last place he was a skilled nursing facility, which was across from the hospital. Now, 2 doctors in that hospital are on the board of the local hospice, which is a for-profit. And I dealt with Medicare, and I only had one friend there that was trying to guide me. In fact, I even talked to a nurse that had been fired at that hospital, and she warned me that they would take my rights away. And he was fearful. He was fearful for me. And again, I'm sneaking ivermectin in, and they're basing their, he wanted a PET scan, which he finally got. I think it was July. When he was in that skilled nursing facility, I said he wants to have rehab. If he is strong enough, will you switch him to rehab? Well, they had no intention of doing that. I can only tell you, he died on a Thursday, August 3rd. Monday, and I couldn't stay with him like I stayed with him at the hospital. I would never leave his side. All I know is that something happened that Monday, and I also let the ombudsman know. In fact, the ombudsman told me to try to get him out of the county. He told me somebody came in to give him a blood test on Monday, and something happened where the blood got on the person, and my husband was talking about, I hope they didn't make you have the COVID vaccine to keep your job. And he didn't really want to, he was saying no to the blood test, but the person that was giving it to him looked fearful, and my husband didn't want that person to lose their job. He was trying so hard. He was so proud of himself that he stood up for this person there, the lab technician. Well, on Wednesday, it just didn't compute to me. And I was always asking what medications they were giving him, because I knew what he wanted and I knew what he didn't want. And he didn't want morphine during the day, because then he could not even attempt physical therapy. Well, Wednesday, I asked the nurse that only worked there once a week, what happened on Monday? And she got very fearful looking, and she said, I have to call my supervisor. I can't talk about anything. Well, this head nurse, they all came into my husband's room and accused me of being abrasive. All I was doing all along was asking questions to make sure that my husband, was getting the care, because I had intentions of getting him back to San Diego. All I know is, I just knew, first of all, my husband was still eating, and a person that's dying doesn't eat. when I left Wednesday night, I had gotten hold of a social worker at Scripps. And the nurse, I knew this nurse, she was only too happy to give out morphine. I just knew. I knew she was going to give him that dose. And 4 o'clock in the morning, I got the call. And the last thing my husband said to me was, I don't understand the system. I don't understand. And of course he told me he loved me. I think about the people that were in that facility that don't have anybody to advocate. I just have to, if they could do this to one of their own, it's just pure evil. Pure evil. I just hope that I honor his career. He was a humanitarian. He loved children. I know what he used to do at urgent care because he was walking between two worlds. A woman would come in pregnant and say, my OBGYN wants me to get a flu shot. And my husband would say, I'll do it on one condition. If you go in the restroom, I want you to read the insert. I can't tell you how many mothers came out and thanked him and said, no, thank you. And I'm sure that a couple of times he lost jobs because of it. And he knew, that's why we went to Florida. He knew that, some of his peers complied and got the shots. And I don't know, again, how. I just know that when he went for the first round of chemo, I couldn't be there like I was. I couldn't even get into the hospital because I didn't have a vaccine card. And we might as well be living in Nazi Germany. And it really hit home for me because my relatives died in the Holocaust. And that's what amazed me with my niece, how brainwashed as an ER doc she is, because her 2 years ago, I know the shot took out her grandfather. And even my brother-in-law admitted it.
Thank you for telling this really important story, and we will not forget him. We can put his picture up in the bus.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. He so admired you too. We watched the Vax, the first one, over and over, and I can't tell you, I just saw Del Bigtree again. They're just so amazing people. And I would tell him, you can't do this alone. You've got to be around to support. We knew Dr. Butar. I just hope his children too will realize what a brave heart he was. And I only hope that I can do justice.
You already have done justice. Thank you.
Thank you.